So my friend Colt Capper, and you may have seen his YouTube channel, was having a song of his mixed at this guy's studio. He sent me some pictures. It's insane. So this guy's name is Matt McClure. He is an audio engineer, a producer, songwriter, mixer.
Our very first gig was with George Strait out on a stadium tour. I, for the next 13 years, toured and mixed front of house for every country artist you can think of. That whole time I had the dream of doing this.
And he converted his entire basement into this completely modular recording and mixing studio. It's nuts.
Do you want to go see a cool studio?
Hey, I'm Matt. Welcome to my studio, The Roost. So, welcome. I've got a couple ISOs out here in the garage. This is the room right here.
Wow. Okay, so we're down in the basement. Wow, this is crazy.
I would call this room my multi-purpose room because it's used for tracking, mixing, Atmos mixing. I have songwriting sessions in here. It's called The Roost. You'll probably notice there's a theme with tractors and barn wood, and I grew up on a farm in Illinois, and I always wanted to have a barn for a studio, and so I brought the barn into the studio.
It's impressive that this is all in your basement. What's the ceiling height in here?
So, well, when we ripped it out to the studs, it was 10 feet.
Wow.
And then I brought it down to 9 feet. We scabbed down and we went with 8 inches of mineral wool, the 8-pound mineral wool,
Yeah.
to kind of deaden it between floors so my wife can sit up in the family room, which is right above us, kitchen family room, and not be annoyed by me if I've got it cranked. And so we came down to 9 feet, and then the clouds obviously dropped down. I want to say the cloud above the mix position is probably 8.5 feet, 8 feet, something like that to the base of it.
That is huge.
And it's 2, 4, 5, 6 inches deep. It uses mineral wool as well, but then there's a 2-inch air gap and then more mineral wool above that and then an airspace above that to the ceiling. I taught acoustics for a while, and so this is the 5th studio I've built, 4th one for myself, and have learned a lot from my mistakes. And so a lot of these bass traps that are on here are in addition to what's behind this. So there's a good 8 to 10 inches of airspace behind here.
Wow.
For bass trapping. As we work the room and with the MM12s and the amount of low-end output they can put into your space, I kind of started to work it out. It's really a treat to sit in here and listen to music. And having the couch where it's located from the back wall, they're not against the wall. So you know how you get that bass build up? I don't care what room you're in.
Yeah.
By having them up here, they're about 6.5, 7 feet from the back wall. The client couch is a really comfortable listening position. They can really hear what's going on when they're sitting here. Then we have an overdub booth in here. This is kind of like a multi-purpose room for me. So when there isn't a drum kit set up in here, we're cutting vocals, acoustic overdubs, steel guitar cabinet, dobro, whatever we need to overdub after we track a session, this room gets set up for it. So drum kit gets torn down, spread around the edge of the room. These mics will come back out on the floor. Some mics I have upstairs right now in the acoustic station and the piano station will come down here and kind of be accessible for me to set up with different instruments. So it's really a great functioning space for pretty much anything I need to record.
Again, we're down in the basement. You essentially completely gutted it and rebuilt everything. Mm-hmm. This probably was a bedroom.
It was a bedroom.
Bathroom, living room kind of thing?
Yeah, correct. There was the family before me had in that room, a big old train set and a TV kind of for the kids to play with. And here was a bedroom. It was all drop ceiling. So it was 8-foot drop ceilings in the whole basement.
Wow.
And we just gutted it, ripped it down to the studs.
Sure did. This looks amazing.
You know, just kind of came back in, and the reclaimed barnwood was kind of the vibe I wanted. I have a camera system, so anybody's in here can see where I'm sitting, and you can see where my spot would be, and
see your face when you go, oh, that was a terrible take.
Yeah, exactly. That's the worst part. Back in the day, my old room, I had a sliding glass door over here.
Yeah.
So I could face forward, and if there's stuff going on I didn't like, I didn't have to worry about this.
Yeah.
Now this has to be cheery and always excited, you know? And, but, you know, psychology 101, you might say. So anyway, and then kind of in this I'll call it pass through. Sometimes we'll
Yeah,
put a
it's
speaker
nice.
in here. I have mics in here when we're recording the kit that kind of act as my room. So
Wow, yeah, this is great.
yeah, it's just a pair of Shure KSM 32s that you get. There's 25, 30 feet from the drum kit to there, and then it's very live sounding in there from the drum kit.
Oh,
and man,
yeah.
when you start compressing things, you can get some really cool sounds out of it. And then the other thing too is the footprints I have in there, I'll roll one of those in here and set it here in the corner, and I have tie lines kind of behind where all this is set up.
Oh, cool.
And I'll plug a speaker in and I'll feed and I'll reamp drums or guitar cabinets and things and use those mics in there to re-record when I'm mixing.
Wow.
So kind of has a dual purpose for me.
Yeah,
And,
that's great. How did you get into this business?
The condensed version, grew up on a farm, Illinois. Was messing around on the piano when I was a kid. Didn't like piano lessons. Started writing songs at a young age. Decided I'm going to go to college. Went to Millikan University. Thought I was going to be big time writer doing jingles in Chicago for mac and cheese commercials. Found out that everybody was much better at it than I was. They were all much more talented than I was. They were better musicians, better singers. But they had this recording studio, and this would have been 1988, 89. They had a 24-track MCI recording studio with a 2-inch machine, and I took this class called Intro to the Recording Studio. They didn't have any recording classes. It was basically musicians, here's a studio, go do projects, enjoy. I fell in love with it immediately, and I felt a connection with the equipment and the knobs in my ears, and I had a thing in my head that I couldn't explain, but I didn't have a musical skill set to recreate it with an instrument. But when I sat down at the desk is when it happened. And so that's when I discovered that you can actually do this for a living. It was 1989, and I read my first Mix magazine article about studios in Chicago, which I didn't even know was a career path. And so then I was like, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. And so that's where it started. And I moved to Nashville in 93 after a short bout at Disney. I spent a year at Disney, hated it, said I'm going to go farm. Went back to farming, got a call that year from a guy at Opryland who was a friend of mine in college. He had moved in a management position, offered me the biggest show at the Opryland theme park to mix live.
Well,
Because I had Disney on my resume,
yeah.
they hired me. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea. So when I came to town, I managed to hook up with this guy named Brett Teagarden. Took an internship with him. He introduced me to a bunch of people. But at the time, life got in the way. My dad passed away. My mom got cancer. There was a lot of family stuff I needed to help out with. I needed to make money. I didn't have any help. I wasn't making any money at Opryland. And I got offered this road gig with this artist named Laurie White. Our very first gig was with George Strait out on a stadium tour. And I, for the next 13 years, toured and mixed front of house for every country artist you can think of. That whole time I had the dream of doing this. And so I was building little ADAT studios for my buddies so I could have that had money to build a studio, and then I would offer to go work at that studio for free. And then I got in it through an artist I worked with. His name was James Bonamy. He hooked me up with another studio. And so I would go in and work in my off time when I was in town. But I figured out really fast that I couldn't be on the road and pursue this career. And so finally, when I met my wife, we were dating and we were deciding we were going to get married. I was at the age of 32. We got married when I was 34. We decided that it was time for me to go for it. And so I got off the road. For the first 3 years, I worked about 4 different jobs. I worked at a mastering studio. I worked at another studio cutting vocals. I was touring. I was weekend warrioring, you might call it. And then I was also teaching at SAE. I was teaching audio, acoustics, and things like that. And through working all those crazy hours, I found my way to this job. And the place I was cutting vocals, I was meeting every hit producer and hit songwriter in Nashville at the time. And I just used it as a relationship builder. And eventually that gave me the opportunity to step away from that studio and go freelance at the age of 34. And that's where it started to go for me. I didn't have my first hit until I was 41 or 42, and I had back-to-back number ones.
Wow.
So it was crazy.
That's
And we got 2 Grammy nominations on that record, and that sort of just accelerated things for me. And then I changed my business model after that.
When did you move things into the house?
So I've been doing that for a long time. So we've been here 9 years. We were at our other house 10 years. I've been doing that all along. I had one commercial space that I had a B room that I had built out for the owners. We had a deal where I would build the room out. They would pay for the build out, and I would put all the gear in, and then it would be my mix room.
Nice.
As soon as I finished the build out, they kicked me out,
and
they rented it to someone.
Yeah.
And so a competitor of theirs asked me to come and work at his studio to cut vocals, and I met a whole crew of people at that studio that sort of introduced me to clients I still work with today. And at that point, I was like, I had a couple of ADATs, and I decided to build my first PC, and I built a Cubase rig, which became a new window rig. And then I saved up and I bought a 24-track radar machine that I could take with me.
Yeah.
And so that was what I tracked on for a long time. But I completed most of my mixes from that point on in New Window in the beginning. And then I moved to Pro Tools, 5-6 years after that. It was literally economics.
Yeah.
I didn't have the money for the DigiDesign stuff at the time.
Yeah.
And I was just, you do tons of free work.
Yeah.
For years and years and years. And that's how I got here eventually. It was just stair steps the whole way. And now I'm fortunate enough that my calendar stays pretty much booked 3 to 4 months out. And it's absolutely amazing because anytime I start to get a little poor me, I remember those days. And I literally get a smile on my face. I'm like, I'm actually doing this.
Yeah.
I'm 52 and life is good.
This room serves 3 main roles for me. Mix space for stereo and Atmos. Serves as a tracking room and overdub space whenever I'm working on projects. And then it also is my writing room. So these footprints, there's 4 of them right here on the floor. If you look down, they're spiked with Sharpie on the concrete. And they're measured off. My Atmos rig is in what they call a equidistant setup. So that means every tweeter is the same distance to your ear. And then I can simply undo the wheels, roll these to the wall, move my rack up. I'm ready to track.
Wow.
This rolls out of the way. And when we track, I'll put a guitar player sitting here, a guitar player sitting here. I'll put a bass player right here. And right there where the footprints are, we'll set up a keyboard rig.
Wow.
So I have all the guys right here with me in the space. My assistant will sit right here at this desk.
Yep.
He can run Pro Tools. I can still sit in the sweet spot while we're tracking. The drummer's in the booth. There he is on camera.
Yep.
And then upstairs, I've got a grand mic'd up, and then I have an acoustic player sitting in the family room. So
that's a big band.
Usually we'll do 6-piece.
Wow.
If I add steel guitar, if it's a country, straight up country session, I'll have 7-piece. So I'll put the steel player kind of back here. We'll stick another cabinet in the garage and mic it up. I have 2 ISO cabinets for the guitar players in the garage. So we have speaker cable already run to those cabinets. One cabinet is a 80s Celestion Rolo. It's like an 80-watt speaker. The other one is a 90-watt Celestion Creamback that I have mic'd up.
Nice.
And they're in large ISOs with vents, so there's no compression, and we get really, really good guitar sounds out of those cabinets in here. So
I bet. Hey, can I ask, what is these? Do you know I'm going to use the speaker's name, the footprint of this room? What is the square footage?
It's 27.5 by I think 22.5.
27 by 2. Okay, so 27 that
27
way.
long and 22.5 wide. Yeah.
Wow, that's great size.
With basically 9 feet. There was 10 feet.
Yeah.
But 9 feet now. So, well, as convenient as this is, like I see these guys, on some of your studio tours where they have everything at their fingertips all the time, right?
Yeah.
But I'm wearing so many hats. Yep. It's impossible for me to do that. Like my Arturia keyboard over here, because I was in mix mode, I moved it, but usually it sits right here next to me. When I'm riding, whenever I'm working on a track, it sits right here next to me. I've got a machine controller here. I have another Akai over there that usually sits on literally a folding table next to me with my laptop here, and I'm surrounded, but it's all easy stuff to move. All the cables are there to plug in. I just can't, I can't leave stuff sit, in one spot whenever I'm working. The room just has to interchange quickly for me, so.
What kind of music are you working on?
So, mostly country music. I will work on a CCM thing or a gospel thing occasionally. It's mostly popular country music or some sort of off-brand, independent, Texas-style thing. But most of it, I would say, I'm in the top 40 country format is
that's cool.
Where I'm working. So, and in the last couple of years, I've been doing a lot more Canadian top 40 artists. I had an artist that we had a lot of success with recently, and success drives success. People find out about something, and I've had a motto for a long time: you go where you got traction.
Yep.
So if you're getting a phone call and it's opportunity to make music, that's a good thing. So I just kind of let it lead me, whatever. If I got called to do a rock record tomorrow, which probably isn't going to happen, I'd be like, heck yeah, let's do it, right? So.
That's killer.
Yeah.
So how did you, obviously you went with the Atmos system here. Yeah. What drove you to invest and move into this, and what has the result of doing it changed about the work you do?
Well, okay, so two-part question. First part, I got a call from Warner Brothers in Canada. I had a couple of records I was working on at the time, and they needed Atmos mixes, and they asked me if I could do them, and I'd never done one, and I said, yes, I can do them, of course. And then I had to figure it out. So I had already been thinking about it, but as probably a lot of the people that watch your show, and you realize there's a lot of expense that can go into this to put a system together. There's a lot of negativity about it. There's a lot of positivity from people about it.
Sure.
It's kind of the Wild West. There's not a lot of rules. To me, that was extremely compelling and exciting.
Yeah.
Anytime there's no rules and I can just jump in and do it, I'm like, let's do it. And so I was fortunate enough to have 3 records to do Atmos on, which paid for about a little over half of everything that I purchased for the system.
Great.
So it made the decision easier. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, of course.
It was better than jumping in. Now, the other side of that is, I wish I could be like some guys that are able to get cheaper speakers and processors and all of that. I've never been that guy. It has nothing to do with the cost of the gear. It's what I'm listening to. And I had gotten so accustomed to the Barefoots that I use. I have the MM12s as the mains for years now. I've been using MM27s as my tracking speakers for at least close to 20 years. I think I had serial number 11 and 12 early on when Barefoot first came out with the MM27s. And
so these are the MM27s.
Yeah, those are Gen 1s.
What are they called?
The MM12s, mini main 12s. That's a Gen 2 MM27 in the center channel.
Okay, cool.
And then I get the little Aratones that are the grandson of the original guy or whatever. He brought me a pair, years ago when he was first trying to resurrect the company, and I said I was keeping the demos. I didn't want them to go. And then I put the footprints. I had the little guys up here as my height and the larger ones as my surrounds, sides and surrounds. So
O2s and O1s. Right?
O2s and O1s, yeah.
Cool.
I don't remember which is which. You just reviewed some, so you
I got
probably
the
know better than I
O1s.
do.
These are the O1s.
Yeah.
I think the O2s are a little smaller.
Okay,
so that's got to be the O2s.
Yeah. And these have a surprising amount of low end for how little they are, to be completely honest. There's very little bass management going on in this space simply because the speakers handle it. And I'm not really putting a lot of low end energy in the rears and the heights anyway when I'm in Atmos. But so that was basically how I got into it. Warner Brothers called, said, hey, we got some work for you. So, and what was the second part of that question?
What is it, how has it changed like the work that you're doing? Are you doing much more Atmos now?
Yes, so I would say in the last 3 months, I'm averaging 2 days a week doing Atmos mixes now.
Wow, that's very significant.
Which is crazy. I mean, it isn't a full plate yet, but I'm also doing stereo mixes and producing and writing. And so, but I have found a friend in the Atmos world. It makes sense to my brain. It was what I always wanted to do with stereo speakers. I was always trying to find the depth in that all-encompassing feeling whenever I listened to music. And the only time I would get it was in headphones, you know?
Yeah.
And so now you can create it with speakers. The irony is we're all struggling right now with, okay, how do we get the speaker sound into the headphones?
Yeah.
Which it's coming.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you've heard about the new Sony technology that's on its way, but I was lucky enough a couple weeks ago during the Atmos kind of thing that Mix Magazine did, I got to meet the Japanese engineers and demo the new headphone technology, and it will blow your mind. If they can get this stuff to the consumer,
Yeah.
the experience we're gonna have in surround and music creation is gonna be
Immersive.
Immersive. I can't even tell you how excited, it's just like, it gets me so excited just thinking about it. When you get an artist in here and to experience it for the first time and see the look on their face, it's...
Especially when it's their music.
Yeah, when it's their music. And when they trust you to do it. I mean, a lot of them are so nervous right now about going from stereo, and they didn't plan on it being in surround. And, you know, and we have the whole headphone debate right now with spatial versus binaural and all of the things. And I just keep telling people two things. One, technology changes, we always evolve, there's always disruption in what we do. I remember when everybody was upset about using Pro Tools to track a session when we were on 2-inch, you know? And this is a disruptor in our world. And, but I don't know if it's here to stay, but I'm in it for the win if we're going there, right?
What is the workflow here with all this gear?
It's set up sort of, the rack's over there right now because I'm in Atmos mode. It pulls up during a tracking session, so it's right here next to me. I can access everything. So most everything in there is mic pre's and compressors I use for tracking on tracking days with full band. My little room has 32 inputs, so I can get quite a bit of stuff happening all at once. Everything you see here is kind of designed for mixing workflow. So I still do a hybrid mix process with outboard gear. And I don't do summing with outboard gear, I do summing internally, but I use these as inserts. And it's very simple. I have the Shadow Hills compressor. I think it's serial number 30.
Wow.
I got one amazing deal on it several years ago. Somebody had bought it from McBride over at Blackbird. Apparently they didn't want it or whatever, they traded it in. A guy at GC Pro that I was friends with said, hey, any chance you'd want to buy a Shadow Hills mastering compressor? And I said, what do you want for it? And he told me, and I scarfed it up, and you don't want to know what I paid for that because it was a steal.
Oh, wow.
And so I got that, and so that almost exclusively lives on the 2-bus when I'm mixing stereo.
That's great.
Along with this Great River EQ. Those two kind of hang there. And then this API right here sits on the band most of the time. And that's kind of my standard, almost go-to every mix when I start. Now, it can get changed out, but that's it. So those are the three things I'm reaching for other than faders and plugs during a mix. I have 2 distressors down here by my feet. I haven't changed the settings on those in 20 years. They sit...
All right, let's just get those settings
forever. You can take them. But I use them on snare drum. So top one is for snare thwack, bottom one's for snare body.
Wow.
And that's what I use them for. And try it out, try those settings, you'll be surprised. And then I blend those with the uncompressed snare top and bottom mics, and that's kind of where I get the extra beef out of the snare. It's something I've been doing for a long time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, let's get real. This month is the month of drums. If you're anything like me and you've been using your child's percussion because you sadly realized he has more percussion than you do, and you're tired of stealing those little egg shakers,
take my shakers.
go to sweetwater.com. And if you've been holding off, waiting for the perfect opportunity to pick up some really cool wood blocks, cowbells, tambourines, claves, and whatever these nuts things are. Now's the time to get them. Now back to you, Matt.
Obviously, you're in Atmos. You've got the S1 thing.
Yeah.
Are you rocking an Avid interface?
Yeah, so interface-wise, I've got 2 HDIOs and a matrix. So they sit over here in this ISO cab. Let me open that up. So
Nice.
these guys and then this guy. So this guy's pretty much, other than some AES, it's doing all the Dante work
Okay.
of the room. And then these guys are all my analog IOs. So I've got 32 in and out here. And then they're clocked to this atomic clock up here from Antelope, and then the Trinity. And what's great about this box, having an external clock like this, is I can do 3 different units at 3 different clocks, but it syncs them all together, along with this Trinoff. So the Atmos rig itself runs off of this Trinoff. It's a 16-channel box.
Wow.
So every speaker in here, including, you haven't seen the JL Audio subs back here either, I don't
No,
think.
so you've got 2 subs back there.
So I have one on each side of the room. They're Fathom, JL Audio Fathom 113s. So the Trinoff is handling all of the heavy lifting. So
That's crazy.
and I think a lot more people are hip to the Trinoff now.
Yeah.
I've been using the ST2 for, well, I had one of the very first ST2s they made before they had the Pro or any of this stuff. It was a gray box, and I had been reaching out to Trinoff years ago about their consumer system, saying, please, please make a professional rig that we can do what you're doing in home movie theaters, because I think it's going to be awesome. I used to go into every tracking room, and I would take in some Lake Mesa EQs and a laptop, and I would spend 4 or 5 hours, and my assistant and I would laser align the speakers, and I would tune the room to my control room back at my studio. And every room in town I had mapped out, and I had on the laptop. I could recall the settings
Wow.
and pull it up in any room I was in. But what I couldn't do was manipulate the phase. I could only change the EQ. So when these guys figured that out,
Yeah.
it was like, whoa,
Yeah.
come on. And at first, a lot of guys were like, well, it's got latency, you can't listen in the control room, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, well, just bypass it. If you're trying to track,
Yeah.
just bypass it, you know, and then pop it back in when you need to get a sound or you need to listen real quick. It's really simple. It's one button. It makes all the difference in the world. And Soren and all the guys at Trinoff have been so good to me. And this actually started out as, I think, a 12-channel unit. We bumped it up to 16 when I went to 914. I could show you the graphs on the screen, what it's done to this room, but the room was already incredible. And then what it did is over the top, so.
Yeah, I've been thinking about getting a Trinoff for my room.
I'm like the biggest disciple of Trinoffs that there is. I'm telling you, I've been talking it up for years. You know, I'd be remiss not to talk about what has become one of my favorite mic pre's in the world. And
Sure, yeah, please.
These guys, and I'm not sponsored. I've had to buy every one of these. Brett Teagarden, who makes these, Teagarden Audio, he, when I first came to town, I interned with him, and he was a session engineer here in town. And he started this company several years ago, and he called me when he was building these in the beginning, and these are the older models. You can tell the face on the one under here is different. It's a newer version. But he called me, and we were over to Ocean Way A tracking one day, and I used to have a rack of 1081s that I used on drums, okay?
Yeah,
Still one of my favorites.
of course.
And I was in Ocean Way A with my 1081s and their 31115 console, right? So I've got 10 million of these things at my. And so I had, that day the drummer was Tommy Harden. I had Tommy come in an hour early. And we had it set up where we could patch over to these really fast. And I ran 16 channels of Teagarden Audio and you know, took out EQ settings.
Yep.
And did the exact same chain that I would do. And then we A-B'd. And I ended up tracking that day with the Teagardens. And it was the same kind of revelation I had, which I didn't tell you in my clock story, but I didn't want to buy that clock.
Of course.
I didn't want to spend the money.
Nobody wants to.
It's not sexy.
Yeah.
There's nothing fun about a clock. There's nothing fun about computers. I fought buying a computer for years because I'm like, it just feels like a waste of money. It's not, but it doesn't make things sound better, right? And I'm like, a clock can't make, well, so I was like, I'm not gonna like these things. I'm using Neves, man. Yeah. And then I went, holy cow, these things sound great. Like, I got a lot of money tied up in these 1081s. So I bought 16 channels and I moved over to it. And that's, I mean, I use them on drums all the time now, whether I'm here or at another studio. They get a lot of use. So that's a huge shout out to his products. And I got his Fat Boy tube DIs. I've got 3 channels of that. There's a rack mount, and I have another one for the bass player when he comes in, and his microphones on the drums. They do great stuff. He really needs to endorse me now, but or I need to endorse him. And I don't know. Anyway,
What's his name?
Brett Teagarden.
Brett?
You need to meet Brett. He's
Come on, Brett.
Great guy.
Endorse Matt. What are you doing? Matt McClure Productions?
McClureProductions.com.
Link in the description.
I do have Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff and Facebook, but I do not service the Instagram account. I mean, it's kind of there for me to watch other people and all that. My Facebook is probably a better messaging service.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll put links to your stuff down in the description, and thank you again.
Beautiful. Thank you.
All right, we'll see you guys later.